The iPhone could have been controlled by a massive digital click wheel, or run by software so crude, Apple engineers called it skank phone. These are just two of the secret iOS versions, locked behind Apple's most guarded doors. What you use every day is only the final survivor of a ruthless internal war, one pushed by secrecy, mistakes, and choices that nearly destroyed the project. So how close did the iPhone come to being unrecognizable? The hidden story begins inside Apple's top-secret bunker. In 2005, the phone market was locked in a race for dominance. BlackBerry ruled business, Nokia shipped hundreds of millions of devices each year, and new models seemed to appear every month. The real shock came from a different direction. Phones were starting to play music. Sony Ericsson's Walkman phones let users carry entire albums in their pockets. For Apple, whose iPod had become a cultural icon, this was a looming threat. If people could listen to music on their phones, what would happen to the iPod? Inside Apple's halls, panic turned into action. The order was clear: build a phone before the iPod became irrelevant. Secrecy was everything. Even mentioning the word phone outside a locked room could get someone fired. The project was given a code name, Project Purple, and hidden behind badge-restricted doors. Only those with the right clearance could enter the Purple Dorm, a warren of sealed-off labs and windowless conference rooms. Some employees worked 90 or even 100 hours a week, sleeping on couches or under their desks. Family members were left in the dark. Friends asked why they never came home. Nobody could know. The pressure was relentless. Apple's leaders had watched other companies leak prototypes and lose their competitive edge, so they imposed military-grade security. Engineers needed special badges to access certain floors. Devices were locked in safes at night. Some teams never saw the work of others, separated by layers of secrecy even inside the same building. Every day, the threat of a leak or a failed prototype felt like it could kill the project. Mistakes were not just possible, they were expected. Apple's leaders believed that failing fast and in secret was the only way to survive. Every idea, no matter how strange, was tested behind closed doors. Every dead end was hidden from the outside world. The company's obsession with secrecy was not just about surprise product launches. It was about protecting the very survival of the iPhone itself. Hold on a minute. If you're enjoying what you see so far, I hope you'll consider subscribing. It helps me preserve the history of these untold tech stories. Now, let's continue. Inside that bunker, two visions for the future of Apple's phone were about to collide. The outcome would decide not just the fate of the iPod, but the direction of the entire smartphone industry. Tony Fadell, known for shaping the iPod, pushed his team to adapt its click wheel for Apple's new secret project. Their prototype, codenamed P1, looked familiar but worked differently. An on-screen click wheel dominated the lower half of the display, controlling everything from music to phone calls. The idea was simple. If people loved scrolling through their songs, why not scroll through their contacts too? Early hardware matched the iPod's aluminum feel, and Apple even filed a patent for a touch phone with a virtual wheel in 2006. But the convenience stopped there. Testing revealed a fatal flaw. Entering a phone number or typing a text felt like using a rotary phone from the 1950s. Spinning through the alphabet, letter by letter, was painfully slow. The click wheel, so perfect for music, turned every other task into a chore. Meanwhile, Scott Forstall and his team were building something different. Their prototype, P2, ran a stripped-down version of OS X and featured a multi-touch screen. Instead of spinning or clicking, users could swipe, scroll, and tap, directly manipulating content with their fingers. The interface felt alive. Lists glided with a flick, and pinching to zoom in on photos or web pages just worked. But the multi-touch system was fragile, barely holding together in the lab. Still, it hinted at a future that felt more like science fiction than a phone. The rivalry between the two teams grew intense. Both groups worked in isolation, racing to impress Steve Jobs. In January 2006, Jobs called a secret demo. Only a handful of executives and engineers were invited. First came Fidel's clickwheel phone, running Acorn OS. The demo was smooth for music, but when it came time to type a message, the room grew quiet. Then Forstall's team rolled out their multi-touch prototype. Jobs watched as a finger swiped across the screen, scrolling effortlessly through contacts. He saw pinching to zoom for the first time. Eyewitnesses say the mood changed instantly. Jobs leaned forward, eyes locked on the display. The click wheel was clever, but this was magic. After the demo, Jobs made his decision. Work on the click wheel phone stopped overnight. Engineers were ordered to destroy most of the Acorn OS prototypes, and almost none survive today. Every resource shifted to Forstall's multi-touch vision. Jobs called it the technology that would change everything. For the teams, the verdict was final. The iPod's legacy would end here. Apple's phone would be built around touch, not spin. The path to the iPhone and the iOS we know was set, not by consensus, but by a single moment of revelation behind locked doors. The name alone was a warning: skank phone. In the thick of Apple's secrecy, this was the internal iPhone prototype nobody wanted to claim credit for. The interface was a riot of clashing colors, giant red buttons, blue boxes, and text menus that looked like they had been thrown together in a hurry. Fonts were crude, icons were missing, and every screen screamed unfinished. One engineer joked that it looked like something out of a nightmare. That was the point. It was supposed to be embarrassing so nobody would want to show it off. This was not just bad taste. The ugliness was a shield. Apple's paranoia ran so deep that the real iPhone user interface was hidden from almost everyone, even inside the company. Engineers built and tested hardware using the skank phone decoy user interface, never glimpsing the polished design that would later stun the world. If a prototype ever slipped out, left in a meeting room, or, as once happened, found by a janitor in a hallway, there was nothing to leak. No one outside Apple could guess what the final product would look like. The skank phone was not a single device, but a whole category of Frankenstein prototypes. Some ran on oversized circuit boards, others were jammed into fake plastic shells. All of them ran the same garish software. The only features included were the ones absolutely necessary to test hardware. You could make a call, send a basic text, and maybe tweak a setting or two. Everything else was stripped away. No icons, no animations, no hint of the multi-touch magic that Apple was preparing behind the scenes. Security shaped every detail. Teams were separated by badge access, and even within the same room, a curtain might divide those working on the skank phone from the handful of knighted engineers trusted with the real interface. Debugging often meant passing a device back and forth under strict supervision, or working side by side with only a wall of secrecy between you and the full iPhone experience. For most, the skank phone was all they would ever see. The culture around skank phone became its own kind of in-joke. Engineers embedded snarky error messages and playful warnings into the user interface. If you tried to access a feature that did not exist, the phone might taunt you with a message only another Apple engineer would understand. But underneath the jokes, the pressure was real. Every device had to be accounted for. Losing a prototype meant frantic phone calls, security sweeps, and sometimes destruction orders carried out by Apple's own prototype destroyers. This strategy worked. When leaks did happen, outsiders dismissed the ugly screenshots as fakes, or failed to recognize their significance. The real iPhone interface remained a secret until Steve Jobs stepped onto the stage in 2007. By then, the skank phone had served its purpose. Ugly, yes, but essential. It was the digital equivalent of a disguise, hiding Apple's crown jewel in plain sight. Every decision about the original iPhone software came with a trade-off. Behind the scenes, Apple's engineers argued over what could be built in time and what had to be sacrificed to keep the device stable and its battery alive. The final product shipped in 2007 without features that seemed basic, even then. Multitasking was the first casualty. The iPhone could only run one third-party app at a time, and switching away meant shutting it down completely. Engineers who had worked on Mac OS X pushed for background processes, but Steve Jobs overruled them. He worried that running multiple apps would drain the battery and make the phone unreliable. As one QA tester later recalled, "We'd watch the battery drop in minutes if we let apps run wild. It just wasn't ready." Copy and paste, a staple of desktop computing, didn't make the cut either. Internal debates dragged on for months. Some developers argued that users would expect to move text between messages, emails, and notes. Others said the feature was too complicated to finish in time. Jobs sided with the latter group, calling for a launch that was simpler than simple. The team shelved their prototypes for a floating text selector, leaving users to retype everything by hand. Third-party apps were another line Apple refused to cross. There was no App Store at launch, and Apple did not allow users to install software from outside sources. The only way to add new features was through web apps running in Safari. Internally, some engineers were frustrated by the decision. One tester joked, "We had to pretend there was an app store just to test what would happen if someone tried to install something." The restriction kept the system secure and less prone to crashes, but it also meant the iPhone shipped with a fixed set of apps and no way to expand its abilities. Even simple conveniences were missing. There was no way to send a photo via text message, no support for custom ringtones, no mass storage mode to drag and drop files. Each omission was deliberate, made in the name of stability and battery life. Engineers kept lists of features they hoped would return in future updates, but for launch, the order was clear: nothing extra, nothing risky. The result was an operating system that felt smooth and responsive, but also strangely limited. Early users praised the touch interface, but quickly noticed what was missing. Some posted workarounds on forums. Others sent feedback straight to Apple. Inside the company, engineers collected these complaints and added them to an ever-growing backlog. The gaps in iPhone OS 1 would soon create a vacuum, one that outsiders were eager to fill. Barely a month after the first iPhones landed in customers' hands, a group of hackers cracked Apple's locked-down software wide open. The official line was clear: no third-party apps, no way in, no exceptions. But that did not last long. In IRC chat rooms and obscure web forums, developers traded discoveries and exploits, racing to bypass Apple's signature checks and install unsigned code. By mid-August 2007, the first public jailbreaks let users run their own apps long before Apple had an official solution. The pace was relentless. Each iOS update from Apple brought new obstacles, but the hackers answered within days. They reverse-engineered firmware, shared scripts, and built tools that turned a locked iPhone into a blank canvas. One name quickly stood out: Jay Freeman, better known as Soric. Freeman saw the chaos as an opportunity. He launched Cydia, an independent app store for jailbroken devices. Cydia was not just a place to download games or tweaks. It was a full marketplace with its own payment system, developer tools, and a thriving ecosystem. Suddenly, anyone could install custom themes, utilities, and features Apple had left out. The speed and creativity on display were staggering. Developers shared new ideas overnight. Users could add a flashlight, change their wallpaper, or even record video. These were features Apple would not offer for years. IRC channels became ground zero for breakthroughs. Hackers coordinated in real time, sharing discoveries and patching holes before Apple could close them. The jailbreak scene moved so fast that for a while it felt like anything was possible. The iPhone's locked garden had been breached, and a new kind of software revolution was underway, one that would force Apple to pay attention. SB settings, a jailbreak staple since 2008, let users swipe to reveal quick toggles for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and brightness, years before Apple introduced Control Center in iOS 7. The flashlight toggle, another community favorite, started as a simple tweak in Cydia. By 2013, it became a native feature built right into the lock screen and Control Center. Notification banners, first crafted by Peter Hajas as mobile notifier, replaced Apple's intrusive pop-ups when iOS 5 arrived in 2011. Hajas was hired by Apple just months before the feature went public. The pattern repeated with widgets. Jailbreakers had been adding custom widgets to their home screens since Dashboard X in 2012. Apple finally opened up home screen widgets in iOS 14, more than a decade after the first jailbreakers made it possible. Each time, the jailbreak community's work set the bar for what users expected, and Apple's engineers took note. Internal bug trackers and patent filings quietly referenced popular tweaks, even as Apple downplayed any outside influence. But as these features went mainstream, the tension escalated. In 2009, George Hotz, better known as GeoHot, received a cease and desist from Apple's legal team after publishing jailbreak tools. The message was clear: the company would fight to control the iPhone's future, even as it borrowed from the outsiders who helped shape it. With every new feature added, the line between rebellion and adoption blurred, and the stakes for both sides kept rising. Every iPhone update still triggers fierce debate, proof that the spirit of experimentation and rebellion never left. As Apple guards its code and users demand more control, the tension between secrecy and innovation defines what is possible next. The phone in your hand is shaped as much by what is hidden as by what is revealed. The real evolution of iOS is far from over. What would you unlock if you could? Thank you for watching. I'd be genuinely interested in hearing your opinion on this in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please make sure to subscribe. There's much more to come.